Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
The United States has a very large national debt. This debt is now over $37 trillion. This is a shocking number that keeps growing. To understand how big this is, think about every American. Each person in the country owes a part of this huge amount of money. For many people, this amount is more than they have in their bank account. This large debt affects everyone. It touches our economy in many ways. But what does this really mean for our country? And what would happen if the U.S. government paid off all this money? Many people might think paying off all debt is a good idea. It seems like the right thing to do. Imagine a person paying off their credit card. They feel better and have more money. So, for a country, paying off its debt should be good, right? However, the answer is not so simple. For a country like the United States, getting rid of all debt might not be a good thing. In fact, it could create new and big problems. This book will look at both sides of this question. We will explore if paying off the $37 trillion debt would help the U.S. economy or make things much worse. We will examine why the U.S. has this debt and what it truly means for the world. 2. Why the U.S. has debt. The United States has debt for a straightforward reason. It consistently spends more money than it collects from taxes. Think of it like a household that spends more than it earns each month. To cover the difference, it has to borrow. The U.S. government operates on a similar principle, leading to its growing national debt. Government spending is mainly divided into two kinds. One is called mandatory spending. This money is set aside for programs that have specific rules, meaning anyone who meets those rules automatically receives the benefits. Congress sets these rules for many years. Two very large examples are Social Security, which provides income for retired people and those with disabilities, and Medicare, which helps cover health care costs for older Americans. These programs are vital for millions of citizens and represent a significant portion of the total yearly budget. For instance, in 2024, Social Security was the single biggest expense. The other type is discretionary spending. For this part, Congress votes each year on how much money to spend on different areas. The largest share of this discretionary budget often goes to the military, ensuring the U.S. has a strong defense. While military spending is substantial, it is not the country's overall biggest cost. A major and increasing expense is the interest the U.S. government pays on its debt. This is similar to the interest you might pay on a loan or credit card. In 2024, the amount spent on these interest payments became the second largest item in the entire U.S. budget, totaling hundreds of billions of dollars. This means a significant portion of the money the government collects from taxes goes just to service old debt, rather than funding new projects or helping citizens directly. Experts predict these interest costs will continue to grow, making it harder to manage the national finances. This ongoing need to borrow and the rising cost of interest are fundamental reasons why the country's debt keeps climbing. 3. How the debt got so big. The United States debt grew large for several reasons. One big reason is when the government spent a lot of money to solve big problems. For example, in 2008, there was a financial crisis. The government spent hundreds of billions of dollars to help banks and businesses. This was to stop the economy from getting much worse. Then, in 2020, the world faced a new crisis, a pandemic. To help people and businesses, the government spent trillions of dollars. These huge spending programs added a lot to the national debt. Another reason for the growing debt is changes in the population. More people are getting older and need money from Social Security. At the same time, there are fewer young workers for every older person. People are living longer, and families are having fewer children. This means more people are taking money out of the Social Security system, and fewer people are paying into it. This puts a lot of pressure on the system and adds to the debt. Also, the government gets less money from taxes than it used to. In the past, tax rates were much higher, especially for people who earned a lot of money. Over the years, these tax rates have gone down. This means the government collects less money. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has to borrow money, and the debt grows. For example, in 2024, the government spent nearly $7 trillion, but collected less than $5 trillion in taxes. This difference adds to the debt. It is helpful to look at the debt compared to the country's total economy, called the Gross Domestic Product, or GDP. This shows how much debt there is compared to how much the country produces. This number has grown a lot. In 2009, the debt was about 76% of the GDP. By 2024, it was over 124%. This shows how fast the debt has grown compared to the size of the U.S. economy. 4. A world without U.S. debt. It might seem like a good idea to pay off all the U.S. debt. But, surprisingly, getting rid of this debt completely could cause big problems, not just for the U.S., but for the whole world. Many economists have looked at what would happen if the debt was gone, and they found it could be very bad for the global economy. The U.S. actually needs its debt in some ways, because it is linked to something called U.S. Treasury bonds. Treasury bonds are like special promise notes from the U.S. government. When you buy one, you are lending money to the government. In return, the government promises to pay you back your money plus a little extra interest at a set time. These bonds are very important because many countries, large banks, and other financial groups around the world see them as the safest place to keep their money. They trust the U.S. government to always pay its debts. This trust makes treasury bonds a popular choice. Because they are so safe, these bonds are used by many different groups. For instance, the U.S. Federal Reserve, which helps manage the country's money supply and prices, holds many treasury bonds. Also, funds like Social Security, which provides money for retired people, invest in these bonds to keep people's savings safe and earning interest. Big companies, insurance groups, and even state governments in the U.S. also own parts of this debt. Beyond the U.S., major foreign countries like Japan and China also own large amounts of U.S. Treasury bonds. They buy them because these bonds are considered a very secure way to store their money and earn a small profit, without much risk. This makes them a key part of how the world's money system works. But if the U.S. debt was paid off, these Treasury bonds would simply disappear. There would be no more safe promise notes for banks, countries, and other groups to invest in. This would take away the world's most trusted and safe investment option. Right now, there is no other financial tool that is seen as equally safe and reliable on such a large scale. If these bonds were gone, it could create a lot of confusion and instability in financial markets and economies around the globe, as everyone would have to find new, safe places for their money. 5. Who owns the debt? The United States owes its money to many different groups, both inside and outside the country. Most of this debt is held by people and organizations within the U.S. itself. In fact, over 2/3 of the nation's public debt is owned by domestic groups. This amount was more than $20 trillion by the end of 2024. One of the largest American owners is the U.S. Federal Reserve. It holds about $4.5 trillion of this debt. The Federal Reserve's main job is to help keep prices stable and control the amount of money in the economy. Buying and selling U.S. debt, often called Treasury securities, helps the Federal Reserve manage these important economic tasks. Another major American owner is Social Security. This system provides money to older people, those with disabilities, and families. Social Security funds invest almost $3 trillion into U.S. debt. They do this because it is a very safe place to keep money, and it also earns interest. This ensures that funds are available when people need to collect their Social Security payments. Other American groups that hold parts of the debt include mutual funds, pension funds, different state and local governments, and insurance companies. Many countries outside the U.S. also own large amounts of this debt. These are known as foreign holders. Japan is a very big foreign owner, holding more than $1 trillion of U.S. debt. China owns hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United Kingdom also holds a significant amount. These countries, and many others, choose to invest in U.S. debt. They buy what are called U.S. Treasury bonds or securities. These bonds are considered one of the safest investments globally. People, banks, and governments around the world buy them because they trust that the U.S. economy will remain strong and stable. They are betting that the U.S. government will always make its payments and not fail on its promises. This makes Treasury bonds a very secure place to put money, offering a safe return through interest. Owning this debt shows a belief in the long-term health of the American financial system. 6. The good side of no debt. A country with no debt sounds like a good thing. There are clear benefits if the United States could pay off its large national debt. The first big advantage would be the money saved. Each year, the U.S. pays billions of dollars just in interest on its debt. In 2024, this was $881 billion. Imagine if this huge amount of money could be used for other things. It could go to schools, fix roads, or support social programs for people. By 2034, this interest payment could grow to $1.7 trillion. Saving this money would mean more resources for public good. Having less debt can also help businesses. When the government's debt grows, interest rates often go up. This makes it more expensive for businesses and people to borrow money. For example, getting a loan for a car or a home would cost more. Stephen Kyle, an economics professor at Cornell University, explained that deficits can make interest rates rise, and the Federal Reserve may then raise rates to control prices. A study found that a small increase in the government's deficit could raise car loan interest by $200 each year and mortgage interest by $2,300. When businesses can borrow money more cheaply, they can grow, hire more people, and invest in new things. This helps the whole country's economy get stronger. Another good side of paying off debt is that it can make the U.S. dollar stronger. A stronger dollar is good for trade and makes prices more stable at home. This means your money can buy more. Right now, the U.S. dollar is used in many global money deals because people trust it. Half of all global trade uses the dollar. If the U.S. had no debt, this trust would likely become even stronger. It would make the U.S. economy seem safer to investors around the world. Finally, getting rid of debt would make the United States look better to other countries and large banks. It would improve the country's credit rating. A credit rating is like a report card for how well a country handles its money. Recently, some credit rating companies, like Fitch Ratings and Moody's, have lowered the U.S.'s rating. They did this because the debt is growing and there are sometimes problems in Congress about how to deal with it. These changes hurt how the world sees the U.S. economy. If the debt was gone, these ratings would likely go up again. This would show that the U.S. is a very safe place for money and helps stop a bad cycle where falling trust leads to higher interest rates. Paying off the debt would boost global confidence in the U.S. economy. 7. The bad side of no debt. Paying off all of America's debt sounds good, but the ways to do it would be very hard. There are two main painful choices, or a mix of both. The first way would be to cut government spending very much. This means taking away money from many important programs. Imagine less money for schools, hospitals, and scientific research. Roads and internet systems would also suffer. Support for older people and those who are sick would be greatly reduced. Even the military would have much less money. Many experts believe that weakening the military might create a security risk for the country in today's world. The second difficult choice would be to raise taxes a lot for everyone. If taxes went up to something like 60 or 70% for the entire population, it would be incredibly hard for families to manage their money. This much higher tax rate would take a very large part of people's earnings. Such changes would make life very difficult for most Americans, affecting their daily lives and ability to save or spend on necessary things. Some people might think, why not just print more money? While the government could technically print trillions of dollars to pay off the debt, this is a terrible idea. Printing too much money too quickly causes something called inflation, which would then spiral into hyperinflation. In hyperinflation, money loses its value very fast. Prices for everyday items would become extremely high, and people would need huge amounts of money just to buy simple things like food. Other countries that have tried this have seen their paper currency become so worthless that people sometimes went back to trading goods instead of using money. Beyond these tough choices, there is another very big problem. What happens to U.S. Treasury bonds? These bonds are pieces of the national debt, and they are seen as one of the safest investments in the world. Banks, pension funds, and even other countries hold trillions of dollars in these bonds. They use them to keep money safe and to earn a little interest. If the U.S. paid off all its debt, these bonds would disappear. There is currently no other investment in the world that is considered as safe and reliable as U.S. Treasury bonds. If these bonds were gone, it would cause global financial chaos. Banks and other financial groups would have nowhere safe to put their money. Social Security funds, which invest money from workers to pay future retirees, rely on these bonds to keep that money secure. Without them, there would be a big problem for everyone's savings and future payments. The Federal Reserve, which works to manage the economy, uses these bonds to control inflation and unemployment. Without them, it would be much harder for the Federal Reserve to do its job effectively. Experts agree that completely eliminating the debt would be an international catastrophe, changing how the entire world's economy works. The last time the U.S. had no debt was in 1835, a time when the world's money systems were much simpler and less connected than today. 8. The right answer. The goal for the United States is not to have zero debt. Many financial experts believe that some level of government debt is actually good for a country's economy. The true aim is to find a healthy amount of debt that the country can manage easily. Think about it like a person with a credit card. Having a small balance and paying it on time can help build good credit. But having too much debt can cause serious problems for your finances. For a country, the idea is similar but on a much bigger scale. The most important number to watch when talking about national debt is the debt to GDP ratio. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, which is the total value of all goods and services a country produces in 1 year. This ratio compares how much money the country owes to how much money it makes. If the debt is much smaller than the GDP, it usually means the country is strong enough to pay its bills. However, if the debt grows much faster than the GDP, it can be a warning sign for the economy. For a long time, the world had great trust in the U.S. economy. Many people, banks, and other countries bought U.S. Treasury bonds because they were seen as a very safe investment. When there were problems in the stock market, investors would often buy more U.S. bonds for safety. This showed their strong belief in the United States. But recently, there are signs that this trust might be changing. In recent years, after some stock market problems, investors did not buy more U.S. Treasury bonds as they usually would. This was quite unusual. Douglas Holtz Eakin, who used to direct the Congressional Budget Office, noted that this was almost unheard of. Money seemed to move away from the U.S. for safety, rather to it. Other signs also show this change. The U.S. dollar has lost some of its value when compared to other currencies like the euro. Also, some countries have started to use the U.S. dollar less as their main reserve currency. These changes mean that some international groups are beginning to have less faith in how stable the U.S. economy will be in the future. Many experts say that the current amount of U.S. debt is still manageable for now. It is not an immediate crisis that will crash the economy tomorrow. But they also warn that the situation can change very quickly. If global trust in the U.S. economy continues to fall, or if the debt-to-GDP ratio keeps growing at a fast rate, the debt could become a huge problem very suddenly. It could cause serious damage to the economy and affect the lives of many people. The key is to find the right balance to keep the economy strong and stable for the future. What do you think is the most important thing the U.S. government can do to manage the national debt?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.